we don't seem to understand the difference between those processes which we just explain and talk about, and maybe can enable through our talk about it because it's a regulative process, that seems to be significantly different than what we mean when we say we talk with another person. The talking with another person and talking about stuff seems qualitatively distinct. Now, it gets very difficult as soon as we start to talk about all this evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology, and people move to these explanatory frameworks. People act as if chasing back why some behavior occurred and then chasing that back to what were the genes that had survival value that then were giving expression to that behavior. I think part of that, even if it's true, we need to understand the difference between talking about things and talking with one another. There seems to be a deep category mistake as the explanation game is ever on the rise. That is, the more that people think that they're going to explain human behavior, the more they're going to miss what speech as a form of action is. Speech is a kind of praxis that we use to move toward the future. It's not just something that is the end result of what had survival value. I think there's a deep, deep confusion. There was many years ago when I had published a piece called Explanatory Theories and Praxial Theories, and I have that piece right here. And I just want to read a little bit of a quotation here. I'm not going to read, I guess, a couple of quotations from other people that I think are trying to help address this concern that I'm trying to raise. This comes from Walker Percy. Now, if people know who that is, he was a physician and a novelist. His book, Message in the Bottle, How Queer Man Is, How Queer Language Is, and What One Has to Do with the Other, is a very relevant source, and it's very readable. Please go check that out. Here's one of the things that he says from that book. He says, "The collision of two galaxies in the salivation of Pavlov's dog, different as they are far more alike than either is like the simplest act of naming. Naming stands at a far greater distance from Pavlov's dog than the latter does from a galactic collision." And I think it's easy to just underestimate the significance of what Percy is saying there. There does seem to be a qualitative difference between our ability to reason with one another, to talk about things as we navigate a future, than to just simply talk about ourselves as if we're more things. What's the difference between a promise and a prediction? Is that all we do with our own behavior, is simply explain and predict? It's one thing to talk about explaining and predicting people in general, or what I'm likely to do as a statistical field, of probability based upon previous behavior and upon cultural norms and upon genetic predispositions. It's quite a different thing, though, to say that all I need to do is to predict my own behavior. That may be part of it, but to reduce all of behavior to being the outcome, and to not see that speech itself is a kind of exemplar case. That is, our speech doesn't go on independent of our talk about it. Those things that go on independent of our talk about it, yes, those are worthy of explanation. As soon as you move to speech, you have to move toward a theory of praxis. We're somehow moving toward the future by way of the speech. It's not just that speech had survival value. It could be that, let's accept that, but to liquidate its meaning by saying, well, that's all it is, that's really missing one of the most important aspects of what it means to be human. To be human is to use speech with some reasonability, that is, an ability to talk with one another, to co-navigate toward a future. I thought I'd just one last point here, and this comes from Abraham Heschel's very wonderful book called Who is Man? This is what he says: "The truth of a theory of man is either creative or irrelevant, but never merely descriptive. The image of the human affects the nature of the human. We become what we think of ourselves. My early mentor, Lee Thayer, would say to his students, when you speak or write, try not to produce a mirror of what is, but a window through which can enter what ought to be.